Seminar conversion rates at the event itself on booking meetings struggled. I will say that the ROI increased. You can have less response and you can have a lower close rate and still increase your ROI because it's a different demographic of people now coming to the seminars.
Welcome into Impactful Conversations, Stories and Lessons for Financial Advisors. I'm your host, Dave Edgecombe. Joining me in the hot seat, Erica Pauly, founder of Track That Advisor. We're here at our annual kickoff event, and Erica's going to speak to a whole host of our advisors about Track That Advisor and how it can be a real, I guess a quill in an advisor's toolkit, to confuse metaphors. But I want you to kind of give me your elevator pitch for what Track That Advisor does and why every advisor in the world should be doing it.
Boom. Okay. Well, first of all, Track That Advisor helps with three different things. So the first level that it helps with is just tracking data in general. So we set you up with different trackers, different ways to track leads coming in all the way through the sales process. Secondarily, we are helping you get good dashboards. So like nice imagery, where did leads come from? What is your closing percentage? All the dashboards that people want. And then lastly, we're coaching you on that. So we're saying, this is what the data is telling you. This is what, maybe is a red flag. This is where you're succeeding. This is what you're doing really well. So we hit three different areas for the advisors. Most of them hear data and want to run. So our whole job, if I were to put it into a 5-second nutshell, would be to make data fun and digestible for these advisors to go sell from a data standpoint.
I think the digestible component of it is so, there's data and then there's understanding that data, which I think is probably what you deal with and what you encounter a lot. We're going to talk about the types of offices. You've broken it down into 3 types of offices and what you've seen from them. We're going to talk about unicorns, more on that in a moment. Erica's 5% rule, not to be confused with any other 5% rules. This is exclusive to you.
True.
I've got something on my list, and I came up with this, trademark pending, the interconnectivity of revenue streams. More on that in a moment. What's normal? Hey, I'm an advisor. What's normal? We'll get into that. Marketing in the gray and the most consistent lead source that you have found in your travels. But when I went back and watched your presentation that you gave for our advisors back in Nashville in 2023, I saw lots of the backs of heads and hands in our shot through your presentation. And through your presentation, I would see people hold up their phones and take pictures of slides. And I cringe because I see my parents doing that sort of thing. But when you give your presentation, when you stand in front of a room full of people, what's the thing that people are taking the pictures of the most in your presentations?
Great question. The benchmarks, right? What's normal? Like, we'll get to that, but people don't know what's normal in our industry. They hear everyone talking about something. They think they're behind just because of what people say from stage, and they just don't know what kind of framework to work in. So when I put those up there, everyone eats it up. Yeah.
Benchmarks are probably a good place to start, but I need to explain how you got into this seat and how you got your start, because you started this in 2009 working in an advisor's office, and that advisor wanted to desperately stop doing seminars.
Yes.
And you're looking at the math, you're looking at the numbers, and you're saying, I don't know, Steve. If his name was Steve, we'll go with Steve. I don't know, Steve. I don't know if that's a good idea. Please walk me through, put me in the time machine and take me back to 2009 when you've got an advisor that's trying to stop doing something that you're seeing as profitable.
Yeah. I was doing all the events, so I was sitting in the marketing chair. I was also doing their books. So yeah, they came back from an event, didn't want to do seminars, and I didn't know what to do. I wanted to be a leader in the company, but they're the owners, so I don't want to distract them away from something they're really excited about. Having been in the industry now for a long time, advisors get excited about a lot of things often. And
shiny objects.
Which we'll talk about. But I just knew from doing the marketing side that it was a great funnel for us, and I knew it was a profitable funnel. And so I'm sitting here trying to figure that out in my head. So I went back to the drawing board and I said, I'm going to force you all to sit down with me in 6 months. And they rolled their eyes and they're like, we're going to forget about this even in 6 months. And I went back and said, what happened in the last 6 months with seminars, with all of our marketing funnels? And I sat them down 6 months later and I said, look, we're hitting a fantastic ROI. Why in the world would we stop doing this? And if we stop doing this, what is the plan for a replacement here? It was a hard conversation, but we all loved it. And They became my first clients. They are still clients to this day, and they still do seminars to this day. So
in that moment, in that conversation, what do you feel was you kind of flipping the light switch and them kind of seeing the big picture and it really, really clicking for them?
I think it flipped for all of us, honestly. And I think we learned so much about our demographic of people just by looking at it. I learned our average case size. I learned how many people are actually coming to an appointment when they said they wanted an appointment. All of a sudden, our eyes were opened to all these different steps that no one really pays attention to, right? We think we're going to close X of the room. But when you break it down into 8, 9 different steps, you really start to see, one, how you could manipulate it and change it and set different goals based on it. But also really understanding your people and what they're doing. And the data tells a story. So they've shifted and moved a lot over the years because they have those points. So it was a huge eye-opener for them as well as me.
I want to make sure that we're all talking the same language. So you say marketing dial. A lot of times I'll say marketing wheel, but it's the same concept. It's that It's that wheel that gets everything going, and you add spokes to it. You add things to it. Another one that you've used was stick rate. So I want to get into stick rates before we talk benchmarks. So stick rates, what are some stick rates that people that you view as kind of the gospel, or you say like, hey, if you're an advisor, this is a stick rate that you should have pinned up on your whiteboard in your office?
Yes. So we do have several different benchmarks for lots of different things, but stick rate specifically, 70% of the people who book a meeting should be showing up for it. Now, if they reschedule, fine, and they show up later, that's still included in that 70. But a lot of people don't look at this. They think that it is a 70, but people are rescheduling, or then they're canceling, and we don't have the proper scripts, to get them back in and back on the calendar. So 70% for the first meeting stick rate. It should be an 80 to an 85 for a second meeting stick rate, but we're getting into the weeds there. But yeah.
But no, I think that's where we want to be to a certain level. I mean, if it's 80, 85 for that second appointment, what are you generally seeing?
If it's 80 to 85 stick rate for the second meeting, you should be closing 50 to 60% of those people from the second meeting. So we track everything from stick rate to setting a second meeting, showing up for the second meeting, kept first to client close rate, and kept second to client close rate. So there's 5 different points, what we call the prospect story. So it's really following them through. And each one of those has a different conversation. Each one of those has a different coaching opportunity, right? You could have 2 advisors and they both have a low stick rate, but it could be 2 totally different reasons. And those are the things we start to uncover of, did you not follow up with them, or did we let too many people go through and book a second and they really shouldn't have? So that's why we can use them to help coach these advisors to do a little bit better.
A lot of this conversation boils down to comparing apples to apples. And one thing that stood out when I watched your presentation was how you have bracketed different types of offices and like their levels of, was it productivity or was it size? How did you come up with sort of the parameters for what constitutes those types of offices, and what are those offices?
So we broke it into 3 different types. So we broke it into Optimize, Scale, and CEO. Optimize is 1 to 2 advisors, heavy on referral existing clients, maybe dabbling in seminars a little bit, but not a lot. Scale is growth mode. So we are trying a lot of different things. We are in growth mode. We're hiring new advisors, sub-advisors underneath us. CEO is the engine at this point. It's a math game. We have several advisors, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're looking at, 80 to 100 million in production. And it wasn't just production. I think people get that confused. So let's talk apples to apples. Definitions matter for sure. And we have people who are doing 80 to 100 million and they're still in Scale, or they're even in Optimize. They just run a really tight ship and it's all referral business because their average case size is $2 million. So it isn't just a production total. It's really how the team is formatted, how many advisors there are, what they're doing from a marketing dial funnel standpoint. So those were the 3. And they function differently. Very much so, right? You're going to have a higher close rate as a optimized office than you do a Scale because we're dealing with more referrals. Like that, right? When we start
they're on a
pinpointing it, yes. And then Scale, we're trying all this new stuff and your ROI is going to be low for a hot second, and you have to be willing to stomach that because it will grow eventually. It just won't for a second. And so you come to events like this and you have all these advisors who are on very, very different playing fields. And so-and-so is talking about his ROI being really high, and so-and-so is talking about her ROI being low, but they're not talking the same language, right? Like we have different funnels, different staff, different size of offices. So all of those kind of get wrapped into one. But yeah, those are the 3 types. That is how we delineated each one of them.
Why is it so important for an advisor to know which office they are?
Vision. Advisors have incredible visions. It's why I love working in this space. They want to help the world and they want to conquer the world, but we do have to corral them a little bit to say, okay, where do you want to go, right? We can't go 5 places at the same time. You can't do that. It's a very different strategy. And when we're doing coaching, we're constantly saying, where do you want to go? Where are you trying to go? Because if you have we'll manipulate the numbers depending on where you want to go. So they have to kind of figure out what their vision is and which one they fit in for now. If it changes in 3 years, great. But there does need to be some sort of a focus, because then we can stomach having a low ROI because we know the payout will be worth it later. Otherwise, they'll just shut the door on TV after 6 months because it's showing a negative ROI. And I would never tell someone to stop, even if it's a negative ROI, because they were only doing it 6 months. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
we have advisors that do radio, and we tell them all the time, hey, radio's the long game.
Yep.
It takes 6, 9, 10, 12 months for people to finally feel like they know you and have made that connection, and your phones will start ringing. And if you do it for 2 months and are like, boy, this isn't worth it,
Yes.
that's probably not a great recommendation.
Right. And at that point, then you need to go back to optimize, right? Because you are afraid of the low ROI or whatever that is. You're not set up for that yet. Yeah.
When we talk about those different categories of advisors, what are the benchmarks that you're seeing for, a scale office versus
How
a growth
are they all
office?
different?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it seems like a huge component of it.
it is. Yep. So when we talk about the prospect story, there's tons of different benchmarks. And I do want to have a disclaimer when I say benchmark. Benchmark is a tool, not a rule. I say that all the time because some things will adhere to some advisors and some won't for others. And then they get in trouble because they're like, well, you said this is the benchmark and that's not how we do it. And I say, that's fine if it's working for you. But they also need a framework. Like, we just need a tool to kind of base things off of. So for optimized, they have a higher stick rate. It's usually 75-80% stick rate because of those referrals speaking into it and not a ton of marketing funnels. And they have a higher close rate as well. Their marketing dial, right? Their marketing dial is going to have a lot more existing client business, a lot more referral than they do seminars. And there isn't a lot of shiny ideas in there. So that is what optimized looks like. Then we move to scale, which is growth mode. So we have about 10% of their new business coming in should be shiny ideas. We need to let the advisors dream here. And sometimes the staff want to be know people because they're like, it's just another idea. But the reason why that's so important and why scale is a little bit different is because the shiny ideas turn into stable sources later. Not all of them, right? Like, well, they'll try 10 ideas and 2 will turn into something amazing later. But that's when we find the unicorns, which we'll talk about. But that's why they have to be allowed to dream. And the other 2 don't really do that. From a prospect story standpoint, on scale, the leads are volatile, right? They're new demographics. We don't know TV leads. We don't know radio leads. So they aren't really showing up, and we don't know why because they're new to us. We're trying digital, and digital is a whole other ballgame. And so
We'll get to that.
We will get to that. So it's volatile. And I tell people that all the time. Do not move into growth mode. Don't move into scale mode if you can't stomach some volatility. Or I tell the staff when I'm doing staff trainings, be patient with your advisor. They're running around like a chicken with their head cut off because it's very stressful. Expenses go up, right? We're hiring staff. We're hiring advisors. It's a really stressful time. And then CEO, again, it's very much more machine-like. So their stick rates, their conversion rates, their close rates really do not change. They hit benchmark every time, and it is a math game. They will turn up the dial on the ads. They will turn up the dial on the marketing, whatever it is. And they usually have 2 stable funnels in addition to referrals and existing clients.
I have a daughter. She likes unicorns. Tell me about unicorns.
Unicorns.
Because I think we're coming at it from 2 different. I hear unicorn as a financial advisor, and I'm thinking of the offices that they don't do a lot of things right, and yet somehow they're still doing tremendously. That's the unicorn that I'm imagining. And then it gets into the whole anecdotal discussion of like, well, you hear that advisor story and you think, well, why can't I do that? But I think you're going a different direction. We'll get to my unicorn second. I want your version of how you view unicorns in this space?
Okay. Good question. Good delineation. Unicorns.
I still have to tell my daughter that they're kind of real because
Oh,
I
man.
feel like there's people that claim they're
yeah.
unicorns. I mean, Kevin Durant, unicorn, you know, like, I
Okay.
mean, they're
Yeah,
out there,
that's
but
true.
yeah,
That's true.
but I mean, I think what you're trying to, I mean, what you see are those advisors that find something that works and it's like, whoa,
Mm-hmm.
you've stumbled upon something. Is that a unicorn? Is it in your mind?
Yes, but it's not for everyone. That's the issue with this industry. Everyone's very close, and it's very much these, mastermind groups, and everyone's talking, and it's an open forum, which is lovely from a relational and communication standpoint. But just because so and so has a unicorn does not mean it's going to be her unicorn or his unicorn. And I've seen it. We've done this so long. Track That Advisor's been around 10 years this year, and we have a couple of offices who just kill it with digital, like $50-60 million a year. I mean, do an incredible job. But that isn't for everyone. It really doesn't work that way for everyone. And I have some offices who are tried and true with dinner seminars. They don't budge, and they have the highest ROI that I've seen out of every office that we work with, and that's their unicorn. So I do tell people to dream. I think it's important to dream. I do think they will find what works for them. YouTube is another one, but it doesn't mean that it works for everybody either. And so I think that's a disservice sometimes, that just because so-and-so found a unicorn doesn't mean it's yours.
Yeah, no, and I think it's the same. It's the same idea in that an advisor has great success doing something, and it's because their market, or it's because of some other factor, and that's why it doesn't necessarily work as a, hey, you should be doing this because it worked for Joe down the street, or it worked for Joe in this particular market. So I think that's what we're getting at with unicorns, and that I'm glad that you're seeing them too.
Yes.
In your line of work as well. What I think is a real benefit of Track That Advisor and shameless plug of what we offer here at Impact is this network of advisors, and being able to see what works and what doesn't work and what other people do and what's normal, and being able to kind of have this this web of advisors where you can kind of compare and pool and have all this data to go off of. So why is that so valuable? Not just in terms of, the collection of data, but actually implementing this and sharing these findings with other advisors.
Mm-hmm. You were talking a little bit about the anecdotal too. Data is black and white. Data removes emotion. And that's why I love it. And that's why I can have hard conversations. I don't like confrontation, but when it's done with data, there's no arguing. And for them to see certain things is really important. And they can come to these, right, and talk from stage, but data is a very different story. And, in my book, I call it the Swagger Olympics. Like, we come to this event and I hear my clients talking about certain metrics, and I hear another client talking about another metric, and I know all of the metrics. And data is so important because it's not anecdotal. It's not just them saying, I do really great here and my staff handles it and we never have people fall through the cracks. Or we hear someone say, I just need to get in front of them and I'll close 50% of them, right? We hear that all the time. I just need more leads. So often that's not the case. Like when you can show it to them with data and say, you don't need more leads. You have plenty of leads. You have enough leads from the data, your own data. It's a sales process problem. They don't like hearing that. That's a very hard pill to swallow. But then we investigate it, and then they can digest it, and then they see where it's coming from and can fix it. But I think that's why data is important for masses, because masses are good for friendship and masses are good for idea sharing, but they aren't necessarily awesome when it comes to like using data to make decisions.
What's it like talking to that advisor's office that thinks that they're doing something, we're not getting enough leads. That's our problem. We're not getting enough leads. And you can look at their data and say, no, it's not leads that are the problem. It's first and second appointment. And telling them that, no, you're doing something well.
Yes.
You're doing something poorly, but you're also doing something well.
Yes.
What's that like, being able to have that conversation with
I love that. That's my favorite part of every conversation. And we call it our top 3 turns. So anytime we do coaching, it's like a journey. It's a trek that we go on with them, Track That Advisor. And
I see what you did there.
Thank you. I'm an English major. And so the top 3 turns are that. I'm telling you, hey, these are the things you've done extremely well, but we might need to turn off here. And they will fight me and they will say, yes, but we just need more marketing, right? Like I just need to do this thing, and I can sit there with the numbers and say, okay, here's the benchmark. You're under it, over it, whatever's going on. So that's not the problem. And it's so freeing for them. They all feel like they're behind all the time. They hear people on stage, they hear their friends, they read all the books, they see LinkedIn, they see all these things, and they constantly feel like they're behind, or they're not hitting their goals, or they're worse than everybody else. And so for me to go in and say, no, your marketing is working. Like this is fantastic. Your conversion is really high. Right over here, this little spot needs some TLC. Like, let's talk about that. It'll also give them focus, because they want to just throw the baby out with the bathwater. And we don't need to do that. We don't need to scrap a whole marketing funnel. We just need to deal with the follow-up from the second meeting. So it helps them like gear their eye toward one spot, and they can do one thing.
You said data is black and white. I have found that the gray does exist in this picture.
It does.
And some of that gray has come from the conversations that I've had with advisors that are, when it comes to radio boosting their seminars or TV boosting their seminars, and sort of that non-measurable metric. So how do you view some of that gray area when it comes to marketing, and how the numbers don't necessarily, there's not necessarily a number to reflect that benefit?
Yep. Several ways. And this is the last 6 or 7 years. Like once radio came on the scene in 2010-ish, that's when this dialogue started changing, because before it was really just seminars. And even radio, when it first came out, it was a direct call to action. Like people were calling after they heard you on Saturday. That does not exist anymore, like you were saying. So we handle that a few ways. One of them is really technical, so I don't want to dive into it. People are welcome to email me and ask about it. It's called gap sourcing, and I talk heavily about it in a lot of my education. But it's about, as a whole, how certain sources did for the whole year versus just your marketing spend this year. So like what all came in from TV or radio this year, all of it. And then we look at the difference of like, okay, well, what came in from just the spend this year? And the bigger the gap, the more we know that the long-term effect is working. I don't know if that makes sense in 30 seconds, but so that's one way that we deal with that. I am in agreement with you though. Like they all work together. I started in on a study, I should say, that we need to work on a little bit more, but it was looking at the offices that added radio and added TV over 5 years versus 5 offices that didn't add radio or TV and stuck only with dinner seminars. And the ones that added TV and radio, everything for their firm grew. The ROIs grew, production grew. The seminars didn't necessarily skyrocket, but the firm as a whole is healthier than the firm that did not adapt to a few new extra things. So I can say that. Like I see it in the data working. It was just too small of a subset for me to do like an actual publication on it. But I will say that it does get gray. There are ways to measure it. It gets into the weeds, but I'm an advocate for people putting them all together and knowing that they work together.
On the topic of seminars, what are you seeing, in 2024? What stood out to you from a seminar perspective? Because I've heard advisors say that it was a rough year for seminars, kind of thing. So what have you seen from the numbers that reflect what way it went?
First, I will say I think people have said this is a rough year for seminars since 2011. I mean, every year they're like, it's a bad year for seminars, or I used to fill 2 rooms and it was a wait list. And I'm like, you all have said that for 10 years. And I will remind everybody, I don't think we've ever seen a year where seminars were negative ROI, ever, including COVID, when we couldn't have events and it was still a positive ROI. So just hear me real loud and clear on that. Seminars are the most tried and true that I have ever seen. So, but that being said, the seminar conversion rates at the event itself on booking meetings struggled. That's going to be coming out in a study that I do this year. So we'll talk about that in that study. It's just I'm not ready to share it publicly yet because we're still in the study aspect of it. And the close rates struggled as well. So the people just aren't moving. They're kind of molasses-y like they were during COVID. And so people don't like that. And I don't blame them for not liking that. It's this source that a lot of people are used to them moving a certain way, and it's more direct sale, not like radio, not like TV. And because they're getting more finicky, that's frustrating. And I get that. I will say that the ROI increased, which is crazy because the response is hurting, the close rate's hurting, but the ROI has increased over last year because the average case size has increased. So it's much higher net worth, right? In 2011, people were writing $70,000, $100,000, $150,000 average case sizes, and they're like blowing out of the water now. $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 average case size. You can have less response and you can have a lower close rate and still increase your ROI because it's a different demographic of people now coming to the seminars. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
And one thing, if you're keeping score at home, I still need to get to Erica's 5% rule.
Yep.
And I think it's kind of in that same vein of just because seminars had a down year doesn't mean you should stop doing seminars.
Yep.
You need to continue to add to your marketing wheel, marketing dial, and bolster it and strengthen it. And I think that leads into Erica's TM 5% rule. So give me Erica's 5% rule and how that's going to spring, how that, can grow an advisor's practice.
Yes. Erica's 5% rule. Take any of the prospect story points, like the stick rate, the conversion, the close rate, and see what yours is, and just try to increase one of them by 5%. Again, everyone tries to eat the whole elephant, and that's not healthy. They're going to quit. It's going to be exhausting. They're going to burn out. They start really strong, and then they burn out. We don't want that. And so my whole thing is figure out what they are, what your stick rate is, your conversion to a second meeting, your stick rate at a second meeting, your close rate. Look at our benchmarks. They're free on our website, and see which one of them you can improve by 5%. And that gets you going, right? That gives you focus. It gives you a vision for that one thing. And then you can pick another one in 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is. And so that's my way of helping people slow down and pull back and say, don't fix the whole thing. It's going to be exhausting. Pick one thing and fix it by 5%.
I had a question that I thought was going to be a real home run. And then I pitched it to you before we started rolling, and you said you're not going to like my answer. And so I want to know what Erica's most consistent lead source. This is data approved. This is you've done the numbers. You've said, and this is the answer to that question, and it's one word. No, but you're not going to give it to me in one word. So what's the most consistent lead source that you've seen through your data?
Whatever is the best for each office.
I knew I was going to hate it.
Everyone asks me every call I'm on. And I will say, again, on this big study that I'm doing, we have the top 5 sources, and they've been the same in the last 6 years. Like existing clients, referrals, dinner, seminars, specifically, radio. Like those don't change. Just, I will put that out there. Like those are the top producing sources. Those are the top that I see. But the most consistent from like a response rate or how the leads function is office dependent. And they are all writing their own story. They all have their own journey. They all are on their own adventure. And I think where it's a disservice is for someone not to be studying that about their office. Like everyone should know what their own most consistent is instead of asking others, because that isn't going to help. They have different staff. They have different locations. They have different budgets. They have different histories. They have different people that they serve. So I know it's not a very fun answer. It's not a shiny answer.
Well, everyone's out here looking for the silver bullet, and I'm glad that you're here saying there's not really a silver bullet, unfortunately. But that's not really the point of this story. The point of this story is to say that you need to look at your numbers and you need to track that advisor.
Yep.
I need you to give me a shameless plug. Where are people find and track that advisor?
Man, you can email us, hello@trackthatadvisor.com, to get a meet and greet set with me. If you're just interested in knowing more about the actual platform and what we're doing for advisors, you can find us on LinkedIn. And you can also find our podcast. We're starting a podcast this year. It's called the Advisor Summit. I know. Molly's really, our CEO, is taking the lead on that one, and she's pretty excited.
Is that fly on the wall standing over there?
There's a fly on the wall, making sure I'm doing my job right. Yes. So we're pretty excited. She's mostly excited, but I am too. But it's going to be just a huge resource of how people are using data, what they're doing, different reports they're pulling, us talking about benchmarking, huge industry leaders. It's a really cool lineup. So we're pretty excited just to bring another resource to this world that I just don't think, I think it's mostly anecdotal, and we just need some real strong data to be coming at these advisors to help them lead.
Well, we're real excited that you sat down with us. Your name kept coming up when I talked to other advisors. Erica's been really helpful. Track That Advisor has been really helpful for our practice. So thank you for taking the time and sharing some of that knowledge with us. If you're looking for more ways to grow your practice, you can check out our Impact Partnership YouTube channel. We've got house rules with our CMO, Alex House, and always Selling with Stories, where Randy Cook gives you some more creative ways to tell your story and help sell to clients and prospects at the appointment table and on radio as well. So, Erica, once again, thank you. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much.